Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's here for the Rulemaking Advisory Committee on Amusement Park Ride Age of Operation. If you're here for a different one, perhaps the Reach Code rack that's going to be this afternoon, that will be this afternoon. Feel free to stick around if you'd like, but we will not be talking about energy efficiency at all until this afternoon. So as I said, this rack is here put together because the division is considering rulemaking that would potentially adjust the age of required age to operate an amusement park ride. And we would like to sort of gather feedback from folks that are interested in that to just help inform our decision on the rulemaking itself. If you are here, I believe, and we have folks here in the room, and I think we got an agenda out to everyone here in the room. If you are on the Zoom and you do not have an agenda, we're going to post a link to that agenda to the chat just so that you can take a look at it if you'd like. Or you can just fly blind, but that's probably not the best way to go. So Rulemaking Advisory Committee, just a general overview. This is an opportunity for, as I said, the division to sort of solicit feedback from interested stakeholders on a potential rulemaking. It's not a sort of decision-making body. It's an opportunity to sort of provide feedback to us that informs our rulemaking and lets us know what folks out in the world think about it and where interests are that we may or may not be able to see otherwise. So we won't be doing anything like voting on things, but it'll just be more of a discussion and hopefully get everybody to hear everything that needs to be said so that we can take it back and consider it all during the process of our rulemaking. Generally speaking, when I run these, I like to run them much more like a discussion as opposed to a formal committee hearing or something where we're recognizing folks, and the folks in the room will have to come up to the microphone just because that's where the recording happens. But feel free to walk up and back. You don't necessarily have to raise your hand. If it gets to the point where we're talking over each other, we may get a little bit more strict about that, but I don't like to do that unless we absolutely have to. Okay. The way the process is going to work initially is as soon as I get done talking for this first time, I will be talking a lot, but this first time we'll do some introductions. I'll give you a little bit of background on the rulemaking, and there isn't a lot of background to give, but I'll give you a little bit. And then we'll just jump into the discussion part itself, which if you look on the agenda, there's 3 questions on that agenda that we're mostly looking at right off the bat. The main one is the one that I mentioned earlier, and that's the operator age on amusement park rides. There are 2 other questions that are statutorily required that we answer for any and all rulemakings. And that's the fiscal impact question and the racial equity impact on the state question. And so we'll be asking those as well. And there, if you look on your agenda, there are some examples of the type of responses that we could potentially be getting. That is not an exhaustive list by any means. Anything that you think is relevant, we want to hear about. But as I mentioned, we'll be doing a little bit of introductions here. I'll start with myself because that only seems fair. I am Andy Bolton. I am a senior policy advisor with the division. And to my right, trying to say right and left at the same time, and I'm not inaccurate and impossible.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Richard Donovan. I'm also a senior policy advisor here with the division, and I help put the meeting together.
Next, I'm going to pivot over to the left, instead of right this time, and look at our administrative staff that are helping out here and that I could not do this without. Please introduce yourself. Nathan is the silent one in the background. Okay, and I'll start on the left with Darren, who was the first one in here or my left, your right, who was the first one in here. So I'm starting with you, and then we'll go to the right on the back row and then circle around back to the next row, and then I'll move to the folks online. I haven't forgotten about you, I promise. Thank you. Before I move to the folks online, just everyone in the room know when you come up to the mic, I'm going to make you do that again because we want it on the record. Okay, everyone online.
Good morning.
Actually, I'm gonna, you know what, I'm gonna make this easier. I'm gonna call out. That's a much better way to do this. Ron, let's start with you.
My name is Ron Burback. I'm with Fantastic Rides, located in Portland, providing probably at any one time up to 80 amusement rides in the state of Washington and in Oregon. So we currently had the contract for over 35 years at the Oregon State Fair. Due to some overlapping, we had to give up the Oregon State Fair, although we do a lot of county fairs, Clackamas County Fair and such, the Portland Rose Festival, Cinco de Mayo down on the waterfront, those type of events.
All right, thanks, Ron. Zachary.
I'll join that. Zach Stokes with IAPA North America. We are the Global Attractions Association, and my purview is the state government affairs portfolio. And then previously, I did 12 years in the U.S. Congress for the Oregon delegation. So happy to be back playing in the state that I love.
Thanks, Zach. Laura?
Good morning, Laura Vannicourt. I'm the Wage and Hour Division Administrator with the Bureau of Labor and Industries here in Oregon. The Wage and Hour Division regulates child labor laws, as well as we issue the employment certificates to employers who are employing minors.
Thanks, Laura. Christine?
This is Joe Bixler. I'm utilizing the other computer in our office. So our company is International Leisure Consulting. We've been involved in the amusement industry for 50 years. And number one thing is we've provided safety inspections for the Burbacks, as well as other carnivals and parks in the Northwest. I grew up in an amusement park, spent 16 years at the Seattle Center Fun Forest Amusements.
Thanks, Joe. In terms of participants, I'm going off of the screen in front of me, so forgive me online if I don't see your video right now. I can't call your name. So if you're someone that's in the background and you want to participate and you haven't introduced yourself yet, go ahead and jump in there now. We might have there's multiple folks that I can't see. There might be a little bit of a traffic jam, but we'll figure it out. So if there's someone that hasn't introduced themselves that would like to participate, please do so now. Okay, doesn't sound like it. Okay, glad everybody could be here. Thank you for introducing yourself. And we were going to jump right into it. I'll give you a little bit of background and then we'll get started. So I'm going to read this section. I gave it to you, now I'm going to read it to you, which my high school English teacher would hate me for, but here I am. Oregon law under Oregon Revised Statute Chapter 460 defines and regulates amusement park rides and devices. It also delegates to the department authority and responsibility to oversee amusement park rides and devices. These responsibilities include oversight of insurance requirements, permitting, legal compliance, and enforcement. Accordingly, the division has promulgated and maintains administrative rules in Oregon Administrative Rule Chapter 918 Division 200, the Amusement Ride and Device Specialty Code. Currently, OAR 918-200-0070 sub 5 sub A states the amusement devices shall be operated only by ride operators at least 18 years of age. And that question specifically is the rule that we're here to talk about, get some feedback on potentially a rulemaking related to that 18 years of age portion. So first topic we're hoping for some feedback on you is that the division seeks feedback on the appropriate minimum age for amusement ride operators. Currently, ride operators are required to be at least 18 years of age. Some other states allow ride operators to be as young as 16 years of age, which is consistent with the federal minimum, which states may exceed, but it is a minimum. Some states require the operators under the age of 18 work under specific supervision. only work on rides for small children, or only work on fixed amusement ride devices, excuse me, which are fixed in place and are not traveling rides. The division seeks discussion on any potential change in the minimum age requirement and invites all feedback on the proposed steps within the rule. As I mentioned, there's some examples of the type of feedback we could potentially get, such as the existing minimum age requirement is sufficient and should remain unchanged. The existing age requirement is unnecessarily restrictive, should be amended or repealed to allow amusement ride operators as young as 16 or some or all fixed rides. A different age would be an appropriate minimum age for ride operators. There should be a different minimum age for different ride operators depending on the type of ride or some other factor, or if there's something that is completely different from this list of things, feel free to bring it up if you think it's relevant. With that, I would love to open it up for general discussion. Yeah, if you feel free to chime in, and if it does end up being a little bit too hard to sort of govern the conversation, we might put some guardrails on that, but for right now, let's go, jump in.
I guess this is Joe Bixler. I guess maybe I'll throw in my 2 cents. The amusement park in Seattle, Washington that I grew up in, starting at the age of 16. The criteria at that time with the state of Washington was that we could utilize anybody from 16 on up as far as an amusement ride operator. If I don't remember the rules exactly with the state of Washington, but they could not be around a shipyard, a machinery such as a lathe or something along that line. So there was some criteria that kept somebody safe. I've always felt that if a individual at 16 years old has passed a driver's license test, that they've got the ability and the hand-eye ability to be able to actually operate an amusement ride. We were very successful with that. Good thing was most of them don't have bad habits yet because they were new to the labor industry, and it was pretty easy to kind of mold them into what we wanted, and they were pretty good about following the rules. You know, like any other age group, you still have people that aren't going to follow the rules. You're going to have to dismiss them accordingly. The big difference, I think, between a permanent park situation and a mobile situation is the traveling. The dynamics of somebody traveling is completely different. Doesn't matter how old you are, you have to be a mature individual, and it's very important that you are capable of dealing with everything that goes along with that, because you're traveling, you're not going home each night, and it's something I think it's very important that we keep that in mind. That's the difference between the two. There are rides, and Ron can probably attest to this, we've had a lot of rides in the past that were extremely skilled rides, rides that were manufactured 60s, 70s, 80s. There was a big skill level involved with the operator themselves. Whether it's been balancing, or there was a lot of amusement rides that we had, like a roller coaster, where we were actually working the handbrake. We were actually slowing the train coming in, and there was a lot more skill level that was involved with that. So you would want somebody that had a little bit more of a mature individual dealing with that. But now most of the amusement rides that we have, and again, Ron can attest to this, many of our rides now, the high-tech spectacular rides are push-button operation. They've got a PLC, a computer that is monitoring it. It's providing all the safety. Everything is in there. The operator pushes the button, off the ride goes. The biggest responsibility is to get a customer from the queue line safely without trips, slips, or falls into the seat, get the seat closed, and you push the button and off they go. If there's an emergency, you take your foot. We have an operator presence switch on a lot of rides, a foot pedal, or we're going to hit a stop. It's that simple. The ride will deaccelerate according to what the engineering design is. The ride comes back to a 0 point, and we go from there. So as far as having a younger person, most of the rides we have, there are some specialties, but the majority of the rides we're quite capable of operating with a younger individual.
Thanks, Joe.
And I'll say a few things. I agree with Joe. Joe's been around amusement rides his whole life as well as I have. And we have in different areas of our portable equipment, we use 16, 17-year-olds in food and gaming operations. Being around those individuals, you can certainly see those that are capable of operating an amusement ride. And like Joe alluded to, I'm not sure when uh, the rule was made, what year, but the technology has changed so much that it is truly a push button. We have magnetic brakes on the coasters that were never available before. So it is very intense management scrutiny on these individuals uh, to find out what equipment they could actually operate, from a kiddie ride to a coaster. But yeah, there are certain things that they could do without a problem.
Thanks, Ron.
Can I ask the question, has there been a concern, or are we just reviewing the rules? Has there been any issues at hand where we've had some problems with 16-year-olds? Of course, Oregon is not allowing 16 years old, it's 18 years old.
Right. The current rule in Oregon is 18 and older, and we're
Yep,
taking
that's correct.
using this as a way of sort of re-examining and whether or not that rule should be reopened.
Good morning. Oh, sounds so powerful up here. Brandon Robin, Oaks Park. I'm currently the CEO for Oaks Park. I've been in this industry since I was 16. I started as a lifeguard at Six Flags, California, Magic Mountain, Hurricane Harbor, as did a lot of my lifelong friends. Started working either on the aquatic side or on the hard park, the amusement ride side at 16. Back in the early 2000s, late 90s. Not, these gentlemen have spoken about ride technology and how, is that better? Worse.
No, it's worse.
Just pass it around like the good old days. So long story short, I've been in this industry a long time. I've had the pleasure of seeing people like myself start as a teenager, what many of us would call a kid, but as a young adult and work through this industry, be afforded opportunities for career development, to run facilities like Oaks Park or run businesses like Funtastic, Enchanted Forest, things like that. There's countless examples of how opportunities as a teenager have really helped the youth grow and develop, learn about safety, responsibility, working safety sensitive positions. So I would say that currently Oregon's 18 and over requirement is really restrictive. And it's a barrier for a lot of young adults to gain really good work experience. As they've said, rides have come a long way. Things are a lot simpler. But more specifically, I think when you look at a 16-year-old versus an 18-year-old, I'm pretty sure everyone in this room on the call can come up with countless examples of 18 and over adults who don't have the maturity of a 6-year-old. And they've got, they probably know some 12-year-olds that are more mature than 40-year-olds. Age just is not really a good indicator of maturity, and to some extent physical ability. At 16 versus 18, there's really no difference in can they operate a ride, can they be trained to be proficient in operating that ride, enforcing rules. If you put a 16-year-old behind the wheel or behind the wheel of a motor vehicle, they can go on the road, they can be around. They could be driving next to a busload of kids. where they can inadvertently, be texting and driving and cause a catastrophic event to happen. The rides that we have, the safety procedures that are in place, the engineering controls just don't allow that to happen. So I would say that we are strongly in favor of amending this rule. Hey.
This is just a quick test to see if we're still having some feedback issues, and we are. So I'll only speak if I really have to for the moment. Anybody else in the room that?
So again, I'm Darren Harmon with Bullwinkles. Just as Brandon said, also, I started at 16 in the industry. I've been in it for 45 years now. Started in California, moved up here to Oregon, and we've been riding amusement rides. Now, difference when in a family entertainment center, there's not very many amusement rides, but some of them do get tagged to be permitted and handled by the state. However, our insurance company also is very heavy on making sure that they have all of our stuff inspected and look at our safety protocols and our training. So training a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old is the same training. And so when it comes up to it, but then we're restricted, like with a few of our rides that only 18-year-olds can operate it, where there is a 16-year-old in the area also. So we're really in favor of getting rid of that rule also, so we can have the majority of our staff that are under 18 work in any area of our park. So one of our Bullwinkles core values is safety. So we are big on making sure that that is happening. There's always a manager in the area that is at least 21. So that's already been handled through our own policies. And I think that there's probably a lot of businesses that would do that same thing to make sure that we're being safe in everything. We hire, like I said, a majority of minors under 18, and it makes it a little difficult on some days when the 18-year-olds don't show up to work. And so now you can't operate a couple of our rides. So it would be nice to eliminate that rule here, just as in quite a few other states that have a lot more family entertainment and amusement places than Oregon does. So, and I'm open to if anybody wanted to come out and see what we do or check it out, we're open for that. So thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Susan Baslett from Enchanted Forest. I agree with what everybody said. We are also in favor of lowering the age limit to 16. As with everybody, safety is our #1 priority. And it really has to do with our training opposed to the age. So like everybody else, our training is really extensive. We have video, printed materials, shadowing, hands-on training, written and practical testing, followed by close supervision. And at any point in that training, we would stop that training if we felt that person wasn't safe. And in order to be able to operate a ride, you have to be able to pass all of those tests, pass everything to be able to operate a ride. So it isn't just that you're given the reins and you get to go. There's lots of training. And I know this is the case with everybody else here also. And for us, I think everybody knows their rides specifically. And for us, we would take a lowering of the wage to 16, and then we would apply it to our situation. So for example, we would put 16-year-olds on stop and start kiddie rides or other kind of supporting, loading, unloading, measuring heights, things like that. We would make sure there's a supervisor in that specific area. We would make sure they're visible, not behind the scenes. And we would also, there's something else for us that we would bring into it. We have some rides, like our Big Timber Log Ride, for example, where you have your operator, but you also have a whole crew that operates that ride. So it takes 5 people to run that ride. We would not put a 16-year-old in the operator position on that ride where he's the team lead for everybody else. So we would draw the line there. And so I guess my point in saying that is that everybody knows their rides. We just would not put them in a supervisory position. And I believe everybody would make very safe decisions, and they know their rides better than anybody else. We are in the same position as a lot of other places. We have difficulties, particularly at the end of our season, particularly if a whole bunch of people don't show up. And we're seasonal. So it's more difficult to get 18-year-olds. And so we would like to open up our opportunities and be looking at a bigger workforce to be able to choose from also. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question about the training that you all have mentioned. I know that there are, and maybe folks, maybe this is general, folks have mentioned trainings. I could see them coming from the manufacturers of the rides, from the insurance providers, or from in-house. Could folks just put on the record the source of the trainings or the requirements of, you know, wherever they're from? I would appreciate that. Part of the wrap. Yeah, just put, step up, put it back on the mic and just say like where your trainings come from, why they are caused to be those trainings.
Okay, so ride manufacturers set a lot of rules regarding their rides. A lot of that will have to do with procedural content. Now, we'll honor all of that. And, but a lot of the ride training will be very specific to us. We make our own videos, and our actual tests and everything, they're all made by us. And again, I would say we know our ride better than anybody else, and it incorporates things from the ride manufacturer. And our insurance agency, they have us inspected. And just like Joe said, those inspectors will look at everything. They'll look at the ride mechanics, they'll look at our training, they'll look at everything. And so there's a lot of eyes that go on that training to make sure it accomplishes everything we need to accomplish. And there's so many steps to that training for us.
Thanks.
Just kind of backing up what Susan's saying and some of the other folks. I think that, first of all, the manufacturer in each one of the manuals, especially the newer manuals, has got quite a bit of criteria on operator training and responsibility. So that's put forth already by the manufacturer. The manufacturer puts the height requirements. They give you physical restrictions, height, sometimes too small, too tall. And then in ASTM F2291, there's criteria to help the owners, operators of a ride. And then F770 in ASTM, that also is information responsibility for the owner operator. And that's going back through where you have to have document pre-opening inspections, documented operator training. We have to provide our customer safety signage with any kind of physical restrictions, height, health restrictions. So all that criteria is already coming from the manufacturer and coming from the ASTM F24. So there's a lot of information that's out there to help support and give direction to the owners of either mobile or park rides. And so that helps us put us in a position so it doesn't matter we're training a 16-year-old or a 96-year-old. The same criteria is used. So there's a lot of information that's out there in the industry to support it and make it extremely safety regardless of your age of operation.
Thanks, Joe.
So just to kind of echo what everyone says, or has said, the training really starts with the manufacturer. They're the ones that set the baseline for operations of the ride, opening, closing procedures, loading, unloading, dispatching. And then from there, there's also additional requirements that come down from insurance companies that as they do their inspections, they look at the individual particular situation, you know, the state that you're in, the environment you're in, and can require additional measures to be put into place. And then from there, the owners, the subject matter experts on their particular situation can go above and beyond that. At Oaks Park, we also use a third party for ride operator training. It's International Ride Training Group. All of our operators go through a set course that goes above and beyond what you would need to know at each particular ride. So essentially think of it as kind of like a pre-service training. So they come in, they learn, the overall duties of what an operator is, regardless of the ride that you're at. Go over emergency procedures, whether it's park active shooter stuff or it's ride specific, all of that before they actually get trained on a particular ride. So the training that employees in the state get on rides is extremely comprehensive and goes well above what the manufacturer requires. So anything that I missed? Okay. And even before that, you just have the hiring process, the fact that you're bringing someone in, interviewing them, assessing them based on their ability to communicate effectively, follow instructions. All of that plays into your decision or the operator's decision to hire someone and put them in a safety sensitive position. So as I mentioned, very comprehensive process to be hired and then trained and certified as a ride operator.
Any additional comment on either training specifically or the topic in general? Anything that you think hasn't been touched on yet or that should be touched on again?
This is Laura. Oh, go ahead, Zach.
Sorry, Laura. Zach Stokes with IAPA. I will join with everyone else and say I started in the industry when I was 16 as a lifeguard. So I'm very well aware of the opportunities that this gives when age requirements are lowered, obviously within safe operations. I would like to say on this one, Oregon is one of 10 states that has 18 or over requirements around the country. And just for the record, the 40 states, 21 of them are 16 and up explicitly, and then 19 are do not have any age requirement, either statutory or regulatory. So I'd like to point those out. And then something that Susan brought up, and we've had this on this discussion in the last couple minutes here, is the training aspect. It is obviously according to the manufacturer guidelines, ASTM guidelines, and everything that the industry does in terms of safety. It is not based on age. It is based on the safe operation of the ride. And I think that's something that I'd like to reiterate here for the meeting, is that, the training that we do is extensive. And it, again, like Joe said as well, 16 or 96, they're all going to get the same training. And I think that it bears repeating for everyone in the room and here online. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Laura?
From a wage and hour viewpoint related to child labor, just wanted to highlight that it is permissible to employ 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds to operate amusement park rides. So there wouldn't be anything prohibited there. And then the only limitations on employment of 16 and 17-year-olds would be the number of hours they can work in a week, which is limited to 44 hours.
Excellent. Anyone else? Okay, if no one's jumping in, I have two follow-ups questions that I'd like to ask just generally. Anybody can respond if they'd like. There was mention of in the past there being more sort of high skill rides that took more like skill to operate. It sounded like rides that were manufactured more in like 70s, 80s. Are those rides largely out of operation now in Oregon, or are they still operating? Are they being replaced gradually over time with newer rides? I don't know, and I'm just curious.
My experience is that many of the rides that Oaks Park is a good example. They have had an Eli 16 wheel that was cable driven. That was a high skilled ride, in my opinion. I had 2 rides on the Midway in Seattle at the Fun Forest Amusement Park, where we had a 12 wheel and a 16 wheel. Both were extremely high skilled rides. And then we had a Galaxy roller coaster where the operator was the computer. They had to set the brakes, they had to watch the cars, they had to watch the speeds. Did hand brakes to actually physically trim and slow the car down when it came into the station. Those 3 rides were my highest risk rides for operation. So we chose to really work, not necessarily, if a 16-year-old could fit that, we used them. But a lot of times it was somebody that had a few more years. They might be at our park for 2 or 3 years before we'll end up putting them in that ride. And then Oaks Park is a great example because they've upgraded their wheel. The question was, yes, many of our rides now are being upgraded because of the labor issues. And it's very difficult on a 16 or a 12 wheel. We got to be able to balance. We had to be able to add and subtract. And it didn't matter 16 or 96. We had a lot of trouble with the math on the rides. So they couldn't add or subtract to be able to move the ride around. So most of the rides, Oaks Park, again, good example, they've gone through the majority of their rides that were the older rides have been upgraded to the newer style, same ride with the upgrade version or completely replacing the ride. And the same thing with Fantastic Shows. Ron Burback and his rides that they have, they've gone through a lot of the rides and upgraded them, same ride, but got the newer version. I'm not sure Albert Freeman, I don't think, is here at this meeting, but they had rides that were Octopus and Hirely Aircraft built them. Octopus and Spider. The Spider was another skilled ride for balancing. He now has developed a new ride that basically a PLC is operating. So it is changing slowly. It depends on the financial state of the owner because these rides aren't very cheap anymore. So, but it is changing. And I think anybody that has these older rides do recognize that and are putting higher skilled employees on there.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, I would just like to add that, yeah, as Joe mentioned, Oaks Park has gone through and has historically had has had rides that took a little bit more skill to operate. We've since worked with the manufacturers, upgraded those systems, make them easier to operate. But I would just like to emphasize that's not really indicative or a result of age or maturity. I would say it's just the way things are going. You know, if you look at the cars that are on the road now, the number of manual transmission operated vehicles versus automatic, there's a lot of people nowadays that just don't know how to drive those. When you bring in a workforce that's used to computer technology, that's familiar with touchscreen, working with improved technology, some of the manually operated systems are more challenging for them, regardless of age. So that's just our industry's way of moving on, you know, keeping with the current times, using technology, making processes easier, removing really enhancing safety. Because as soon as you start to integrate, you know, take advantage of computer technology to perform routine tasks, you know, monitor various measurements throughout the ride, and you take that away from an operator, just like you do on a car, you're going to improve safety. So yes, we've upgraded all of our rides, and any ride that, you know, even with 18 and over being the current requirement, you know, we find that there are rides that are, you know, a little bit more challenging for someone to operate regardless of age. And So we'll take the initiative to work with the manufacturer, specifically on the most recent upgrade. We added a secondary brake on a Rocco plane, which is currently BatTech Enterprises. Albert Friedman has the rights to that ride. We work specifically with his company to modify that to make it easier for the operator. Again, not in anticipation of any age change, but just to make it easier for the operator, ultimately improving safety.
Thank you.
I would just like to add, when we're talking about upgrades, which our park has done several on our big rides, and for somebody who isn't in the industry, just to be very specific about what some of these things are. So, for example, on our log ride, which is probably our biggest ride, the ride will stop itself. So there are zones, and if a log cannot enter another zone until the one before it has passed through the next zone. So it's next to impossible for them to hit or anything like that, because the ride's going to stop itself, and it does. So it just, and our experience is that that's extremely reliable. We also have, you're talking about zones where it will stop itself, but also like in our indoor Mondor ride, that is almost like a driverless car in a way. It has sensors on those cars that keep it from hitting the car in front of it. So it will stop itself, and it uses all of that technology. So those are some of the specifics we're talking about when we're talking about safety technology that's built into the ride. I just want to be clear about that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'll go with my other follow-up question then. There was some talk about the differences between operating traveling rides versus fixed rides. And what I'm hoping to drill down a little bit more on there is to what extent, if any, that should impact the age requirement for traveling versus fixed. Does anybody have any thoughts, feelings on that?
Well, my thoughts
My
on
ex-
it is
Go ahead, Ron. No, Ron, please.
an amusement ride is an amusement ride is an amusement ride. I own portable amusement rides, and I own permanent amusement rides, and they all are machines. They're all machines till you put people on it, then they become an amusement ride. So going back to reiterate what everybody's saying, it's just for parks that can use 16 or 17-year-olds. That shouldn't be the question. The question is, can they operate amusement rides, irregardless of whether I'm operating at the Oregon State Fair and I have permanent rides there. I used to have permanent rides there, or the Puyallup Fair, which I have wooden coasters, I have steel coasters, I have all kinds of equipment there. So is that a portable ride? Is that a park ride? Because Washington is going to follow suit, or vice versa, when you guys consider changing this, because Washington will be next with lowering the age to 16 and 17-year-olds. So.
Thanks,
And I agree with you 100%, Ron, because a ride's a ride. And that's something I think we have to look at. The difference in the portable equipment, it's not the portable equipment, it's the environment. And there's a lot of times if we come in, and our company has contracts to the State Fair of Texas, Minnesota, Wisconsin. We've been involved with Puyallup, where we come in and do the safety inspections and oversee the safety on the midway. And it's all the same. It doesn't matter about age and whether the equipment's mobile or not. Part of the reasons, I believe, when this first came to be in the early 70s, I believe when some of these decisions were made, is in a mobile carnival, they move from one location to another. And so you end up taking folks, again, regardless of age, and they're living with you. It's a family. And you go from one location to another location to another location. So everybody is living in bunkhouses or RV trailers, and it's a little bit different atmosphere. So somebody that is under 18 years old may not fit into that situation of that traveling and that experience. The dynamics that go with the traveling, not running the amusement rides. And so that's a little bit of a difference. And again, like Ron was talking about, if you're in Puyallup and you've got permanent rides, it doesn't matter. It's a ride. Somebody 16 years old can run that wooden roller coaster if their skill level meets what needs. So in my opinion, has always been, it's more of the environment and living in a mobile world, RVs, bunkhouses, etc., that you might want to, as the owner, you would want to have most of your folks 18 years old that are traveling with you from a legal standpoint. Has nothing to do with mechanical aspects of the rides.
You're correct.
Thanks, Joe.
I would just like to echo that. Yeah, it's whether the ride is stationary or whether it's disassembled, relocated, reassembled, inspected, and then run. The order of operation is exactly the same. As Joe mentioned, there are other considerations that each owner would have to account for, when they move from one location to another. Perfect example is Washington State that borders, few miles up, not a few miles up the road, but within commuting distance. And different jurisdictions have different wage and hour requirements, labor laws for minors and adults, and the ownership would have to take that into account and hire based on what's going to work out for their particular situation. But ultimately, doesn't change the fact that the ride is still operated in the exact same manner.
Anyone else? Either on my follow-up question or more generally just on the topic. Anyone? Because in a second, I'm going to move on to the next topic. And I don't want you to feel like we're done. It's like we can always circle back and we can come back, but I don't want you to feel I'm cutting you off now. Doesn't sound like it. Okay. Topic number 2. And I'm going to read at you again here for a second. What are the potential fiscal and economic impacts of changes to minimum age requirement? With any rulemaking, the division is required to make particular note of the potential fiscal and economic impact that might result from the new rules. The division is requesting input from the committee on the nature and extent of any fiscal or economic impact that may be caused by this rule. Some examples, but not an exhaustive list of potential fiscal and economic impacts would be, are there any additional costs or requirements on local municipalities? Are there additional costs or requirements on particular business types? Will changes to existing rules require additional training to implement, comply with, or enforce? Will changes to existing rules make particular actions or products more or less expensive? Will changes to existing rules be anticipated to cause positive or negative employment impacts on Oregonians and Oregon businesses? This is just a list of some examples, like I said, and it can be a fiscal economic impact that is a debit or a credit. It could be something that makes things cheaper, more expensive, easier, harder, however you want to interpret that. Think of the broadest possible lens that you can think of. That's what we're wanting to hear about. All right. Any thoughts?
Well, my thought is that what we're doing is we obviously can't get enough 18-year-olds to operate it. So we're going to increase this labor pool. I don't see how it would be adversely affect not hiring 18-year-olds versus the 16-year-old and 17-year-old. Certainly they all get paid the same when they first come in. Based on their skill level, they're going to rise up and probably get a pay increase at some point. But I think I don't see an adverse effect with increasing the labor pool.
Thank you.
So currently, when So like for our business at Bullwinkle's, what happens is the outside attractions is where the ride requirement goes into play. And it actually, at this current moment, you can't get an 18-year-old you can't get an 18-year-old to work for minimum wage. And so the labor pool is shrunk on that side. So that's one of the problems that we're facing right now. So by lowering this, we can have a 16-year-old who's in high school, you know, most of the time makes minimum wage. And then the 18-year-olds would get paid a little bit more just so we could get them. So that would help in our own business side of that. By lowering it, you would increase our profits or at least labor costs by having that little bit of a change. But just like as he said a second ago, once you get skilled, an employee gets skilled, they're going to start making more money, especially in the way this market works now. So it's not, I think it's just going to be an overall positive change financially for each business if this change happens, because like they said, the labor pool would get bigger for us to be able to do that. I don't know what would change for local municipalities or anything like that. So, but just for our own, I think it would increase our ability to get more workers at the minimum wage level, because that's the type of businesses that we're in, and skilled workers would get a little bit higher wage. So,
Thank you.
So yeah, I don't believe there would be any additional costs for municipalities, additional costs for operators. Really shouldn't be any. Really all you're doing, like these gentlemen said, is you're increasing the available labor pool. And when businesses like businesses we have to compete with other businesses that are trying to hire 18 and over, it just, there's fewer resources. So ultimately that just leads to available positions, job openings. So by expanding that labor pool, we're able to essentially bring on more employees, employ more folks, which results in increase in payroll taxes, increased economic benefit for the local area. The more, the more money that we generate, specifically Oaks Park being a nonprofit, not having shareholders, anything like that, everything that we earn is retained and then invested back in the organization and the local economy. So I think there's a net benefit by ensuring that, not necessarily unemployment, but that the job vacancies are kept at a minimum in any business. Thank you.
I agree with everything everybody said. Also, for us, the way it impacts us specifically is we hire 100 workers a day. So if we have 18-year-olds who we can't find to run the rides for one reason or another, then we'll either pull workers from down in the park that are 18-year-olds that we can use up there, but then it means we have to shut something down in the park. So this directly affects if we're able to keep everything open or not. And because we do have to make those decisions all the time. So, and, it's a good opportunity for 16-year-olds to make more money because we pay not by age, we pay by skill level. And you get paid more to run rides, you get paid more for each ride you run. So it's a good opportunity for them also.
Thank you.
And I will reiterate a lot of points that folks have been making here, but also just to emphasize that on terms of local and state government entities, this will be a neutral impact. The activities that are still going on that oversee this industry will still be going on. So even if that change is made, it will not impact on the government side of things. But as you can see from folks in the room and on the call here, is it will definitely positively impact operations for these businesses.
Thank you. Anybody else? Fiscal and economic impact.
It's been a while since I've had operators because going back to the park in the 70s, I left in 88 from Fun Forest in Seattle. But having our new folks coming in, the 16-year-olds looking for a job, their first job coming in. Many of them we would have anywhere from 2 to 5 years, sometimes longer, because every year they'd be in high school and it would be a seasonal worker. They could come back as long as we left on good terms. They'd come back to us, and then the next year, really common to have people there 3 or 4 years. And as they finally got to a point where they're established a career, they've got the education they wanted, and they're off to that new world. But this time period that we had them in there was wonderful. They were good workers, and I think they brought a lot to the table. A lot of times if we had poor economy and we would get 18, 20-year-old people that would come in and apply for work, they would only work for us until a better job came up. Where the seasonal workers, the 16 under 18, they were devoted. They would come and start in the spring. We might start in April, and they might run all the way through October into Halloween. And so that was very supportive of our industry having this age group working with us. Not only were they skilled, but they also very supportive compared to anybody that was 18, 20, 21. Typically, they're off looking for a better career. So I think it's a positive thing for all of the operators, owners and operators of amusement rides, mobile or park.
Thank you. Okay. Any additional thoughts on fiscal and economic impact? All right. Once again, if something springs into your mind during the next topic, feel free to, we'll circle back to it. Just let me know. But this is our last statutorily required question. And what are the potential impacts on racial equity in the state? With any rulemaking, division is required to make particular note of any potential impact on racial equity in the state that might result from the new rules. The division would welcome any input from the committee on the nature and extent of any impact this rule may have on racial equity in the state of Oregon.
I have a silly question. Why would it be a racial? Is there a reason that?
The question, this is this is a law that was passed by the legislature a couple of years ago that requires any rulemaking entity within the state to answer as a part of their rulemaking what impact, if any, there is a rulemaking will have on the state of Oregon. So if there's no impact, if you don't think there's an impact at all, that's a fine answer to the question. We have to ask it and answer it as a part of the process. So we are, since you're all in the room here with us, we're strong arming you into helping us answer this question.
Okay. Well, then my opinion is we had a wide group of folks working for us at the amusement park. Race was not an issue at all. Everybody was welcome. Everybody was part of the team. It wasn't a problem. So there should not be a problem, my opinion.
I think it will have an impact, but a positive one. Oaks Park, we regularly review the demographics of our current employees. And for as long as we've been doing that, we've seen that the makeup of the Oaks Park team is more racially, socioeconomically diverse than the community we serve in Portland. And we're pleased by that. And I think just, trying to understand why that might happen is there's very little barriers to employment in this industry. What you have is an opportunity for young adults to go into an entry-level position. They don't even need prior work experience, and they can get trained on any number of safety-sensitive positions, grow and develop. So when you look at some of the management makeup, it's just as diverse. It's not, the managers, the career employees that we have aren't folks that, we don't go scouting Ivy League colleges where it's hard to, everyone's being super competitive. It's staffed from within. And these individuals usually, like myself, come in, end up going back to school to maybe earn a degree, But a lot of it's on the job training and development, professional and personal development in these roles that we wouldn't have otherwise, I'm a mixed race individual myself, might not have had I not had the opportunity to apply to a job where, as Joe mentioned, they don't look at race. They don't look at, what part of town are you coming from? They look, are you willing to show up? Are you good with following instructions, learning rules and procedures, and executing on that, regardless of your background. And that's what's great about this industry. It's always been extremely welcoming. So I think by expanding this, by opening up more opportunities, you're just going to see that more. Like Joe mentioned, with adults, you typically get shorter tenure at the park. Once you open that up and you can take a seasonal position and have that employee learn something and develop a passion for what they're doing, for safety, for customer service, to go to a workplace, bond with their fellow employees, to get almost we always talk about it, like the Oaks Park vortex. You get sucked into it because it's a fun place to work. The more people we can bring into that environment, the more opportunities we can give those individuals, so that maybe someday they're sitting in this chair representing Oaks Park, representing Enchanted Forest or Bullwinkles, and trying to make a difference, positive difference in the world. So I do think it'll have an impact, and I think it'll be a positive one. Thank you.
Any other thoughts?
I'd just like to add, or I guess reiterate what Brandon was saying as well. We are the industry of fun. For our guests, we are totally inclusive. We want everyone to be able to come, leave their worries once they enter through the gates, and just have a fun time with friends and family. And that goes also for our employees and our team members. So yes, this rule change, if implemented, would be a very positive impact on racial equity in the state. As everyone can attest to, that we've heard from folks, we all started very young in the industry, and it's not going to be every person that gets, every 16 and 17-year-old that joins, but there's going to be a very small subset of folks that make a career out of this, and they, as you can see, can make a very good career out of this industry. Starting all the way at the bottom, working all the way up into leadership and management roles. So I definitely think that it would have a positive impact on the state in terms of racial equity.
Thank you. Okay. Jump in now or in a second when I ask if there's anything else anybody wants to talk about it. Okay, so that is all the planned topics on the agenda. If there's anything either that you remembered from a previous topic that you want to revisit, anything else that you think we're not considering that we should as a part of this rulemaking, this is the perfect time to jump in and let us know.
I'm Jeff Starkey with Building Codes Division, and I had two questions. One is the examples given for the distinction between the high-tech rides and high-skill rides. I understand those concepts, the way they were explained is interesting, but I wondered if there is a definition that can be found somewhere for those. So not necessarily important for this discussion, but like you say, there may be some of those high skill rides out there. And if 16-year-old requirement was to become effective, would by definition the industry like those to be excluded, or would it be a discretionary decision of each company whether a 16-year-old would be allowed to operate those? And then the second question was with regard to carnivals or fairs where there might be some traveling involved. If you meet the minimum now at 18, there's certain requirements you have to be capable of doing, but there's no real exclusions that come to mind. So when it comes to the traveling aspect, one thing I was thinking of is the setup of that equipment. So the operation of the ride doesn't change, but there is that additional setup. And there again, there may be some technology that has made setup of certain rides very easy, simple, straightforward, or it may be more complex, require mechanical skills. And I'd be interested from Foley's point of view if anything jumps out as a limitation there when it comes to setting up the rides.
Thanks, Jeff. And despite the fact that Jeff was looking at me, I think that's more of a question for everyone else here because Jeff already knows way more about amusement park rides than I do.
I'd like to make a comment on both those subjects. Our company, International Leisure Consulting, we not only do inspections on amusement rides, but we do installation of amusement rides and disassembly, repairs, etc. And so we are involved even in the inspectional aspect. Many rides we have to climb. There'll be ladders. We have a 60-meter wheel that we have to, or a roller coaster. So we have to put on a harness. We've got to go climb to do the inspection. And many times when you're doing a setup or a tear down, disassembly, assembly or disassembly of a mobile amusement ride, it does take you into a different group of people. So at that time, we get reclassified, sometimes almost like building a roller coaster or building a giant wheel. We're almost getting into steel assembly. So that does put us into a different category and the risks are higher about what we're doing. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, having an operator is an operator. So that might be distinguishing terminology about your ruling. As an operator of an amusement ride versus a person that's going to do a assembly and disassembly like in a mobile situation. So you can put that into your rules and have some classification. That's a good point. High skilled rides, like we mentioned earlier, and again, going back to an Eli Bridge Ferris wheel, 1612, number 5, the cable driven ones. It doesn't matter whether they were 16 years old or 96 again. It's the idea of having, typically it takes a while for that person to become comfortable with it. I can't take you over on a old Eli wheel and say, here's the lever, here's the on-off button, and I'll see you later. I'm going to have to spend an adequate amount of time. When we used to do those, when we were breaking in, I might have at least a week with a trainer standing there with that person learning to operate that ride. If you can imagine, a Eli wheel would be like having a truck with a load in it and a clutch on a hill. And I'm asking you to get inside this truck and move it for me, and you have no clue how to operate a clutch. So there's going to be a few issues that go along with that in your learning curve. Once I get you comfortable with it, you're going to be great. You're going to be on a hill, be able to take that truck right up the hill. And that's some of the rides that we had. So again, it doesn't matter whether you're 16 or 96. It's the time that we spend to train you adequately. And I've had people that could not add and subtract to do balancing. So unfortunately, they could mechanically operate the ride, but they couldn't keep the ride balanced. So going back, getting away from the idea whether it's a 16 or 96, it's a skill level. And our goal is to get and train that person for that skill level. If they can't get to that point, then we're going to put them on another ride, or maybe they can't do any ride. But the skill, the setup and tear down, I think falls into a different classification, and that needs to have some definition.
Yeah,
Ron, you can
set up and tear down is totally different. And then I thought we were talking about operation, and that's what we're talking about is operating. I don't need 16, 17-year-olds necessarily to set up amusement rides. There are secondary things that they could do if they were going to do it. Put up visual breaks, fencing, and that type of things. But as setting up a wheel like Joe said, or a coaster to monitor the brakes, that's not going to happen.
Thank you. Yeah, just kind
And
of,
recently, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, just to kind of echo what they mentioned, operating and assembly, disassembly are two different functions. Just like, we may use one employee that works in a game booth to also work a cash register at a food stand. We may use a security guard where you do have to be 18 years old to go take tickets or work in that same food stand. But each of those jobs have their own requirements and prerequisites. But just because they're a ride operator doesn't, maybe some operators, some owners do use ride operators also in other positions, but we shouldn't let that direct the requirements for the operator position. They should be two separate buckets essentially. And the other thought was on I think the other question was on, there's a definition for high skill and not, I'm not familiar with any, but I think you just got to rely on the manufacturer. If they, they're the ones that design the ride. If they are specifying something, the order of operation for that particular ride and their professional opinion requires a certain age, then that's something that we're going to have to comply with, whether this rule has changed or not. So we're always going to fall back on that. But again, the idea behind a push, stop and start ride versus a high skill ride is just the number of variables that any employee, regardless, like Joe said, 16 or 96, is going to have to manage throughout the course of their workday. Doesn't change the fact that it can be a 16-year-old, it could be a 96-year-old. Every ride is unique, and they all have different processes throughout the dispatch cycle. So I don't know that there's a specific definition, and that we should. I don't believe this building codes division should consider breaking that up and trying to define that, because it's not defined anywhere else in the industry that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
I'd also echo that. ASTM 747 is the definitions piece, and they do not classify based on intensity level. It's more, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's, kiddie ride is under 12 years of age. There's flat ride, circular rides, but there's no delineation between, once it's classified as an amusement ride with regards to that in ASTM. It's like Brandon was saying, onto the manufacturers, and they can make those recommendations or requirements based on the design of their own individual units.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And I think a lot of it, if this becomes an issue, then you could go to these different manufacturers and ask their opinion and see if we could get some kind of call on any one of those given things. But a lot of these folks aren't, the ride manufacturer is going to be somewhat reluctant about saying that ride has any issues with the skill, because then it becomes a liability.
Yeah.
And so that's the great part.
Absolutely. And just to reiterate as well on the nationwide part, on the skill side, like Joe was saying, most states do not have those kind of pieces put into either their statutes or regulations. The majority of them would either do it based on kiddie rides, which is, defined in ASTM. I think New York State and a couple others of the 9 that have 18 and over requirements, they do allow under 18s to operate kiddie rides or a handful of others that are in regulation. So I think the delineation that way makes a little bit more sense than creating new definitions that aren't supported supported through the industry or with other states and how they have this industry regulated.
Sorry, I'll just add from Bully's perspective, I'm not sure if it's necessary based on the comments from other individuals in this meeting. But from our perspective related to the difference between kind of the operating of the amusement park rides and then kind of the setup and tear down, those are different jobs, as was highlighted. And what happens when we receive an application for an employment certificate is that we do ask for all the job duties that will be performed, and we would look at it on a case-by-case basis. So that's something that we would regulate on our end when we're issuing the employment certificate.
Thanks, Laura.
One good thing going back on the skill rides is, and Ron can mention this to you as well, most of the time the high skill rides are now antiques. We've moved them out. It's so difficult to find qualified staff. Again, going back to the park a long time ago, if I got a operator that was learned to do an Eli 16 wheel, cable driven, high skilled ride, I would almost do anything to keep him through the season, he or she. And if they left me, I had a hole. I may not be able to run the ride, or I would have to have one of my maintenance staff or somebody from a management person run the ride because I didn't have anybody. So a lot of these rides, just from being cost effective, is we would eliminate these rides. We take that next. Oaks Park has done it over the years. They've moved a lot of those type of rides out and upgraded. And Ron has done a lot of his rides the same way. They've upgraded their rides to be able to get a person, because it is hard to find that skilled person. And that skilled person on the roller coaster that we had at the park in Seattle, it was the STC Galaxy. It took me one season, 3 months of having an operator. Our season was typically closer to 6, but about 3 months of that operator running that ride under supervision before I finally got to a certain point where I felt comfortable about leaving them by themselves. So it wasn't like something, and it's the same thing with a Eli wheel. It's not something you can replace immediately. It takes a person. Sometimes people, if we start them on one ride, this balancing ride, we can move them over to a Eli wheel where they understand balancing, and then they just have to learn the dynamics of the mechanic. But that's hard to do. It's hard to get somebody trained and hard to keep. So we are held hostage as an owner or operator of a ride. So a lot of times we're immediately trying to move out of these as quick as we can, especially when the opportunity is there, although it's a lot more money for a old Eli 16 cable than it is to the new drive system. But that's what we have to do. And that's what's happening in the industry. It's cleaning itself up, moving that out. So I hope that kind of helps with the high skilled rides.
Thank you. Last chance. Okay. Doesn't seem like there's anyone else. Again, until I stop talking, feel free to interrupt me if you have something else. Additionally, you can always email you through the end of the day on Friday, 5 o'clock on Friday. We'll accept additional written comments. So if like on the way home, you're like, oh, I should have said this. Email it to the rules coordinator inbox, which I know a handful of you RSVP'd to, and we're going to post it to the chat as well for those online. And if you are in the room and you are not looking at the chat and you don't remember what the rules coordinator email is, find me when we get done and I will give you a copy if you need one. So yeah, written comments through the end of the week. If there's anything else that you want us to consider. The next steps on this would be division will take all the feedback we get from this, and we will consider that in the process of looking at the rulemaking. The next steps in the rulemaking itself would be we would file a notice of a rulemaking hearing. We would then hold a hearing, which would be another opportunity for additional public comment to come in. Feel free to come back. I'll probably be here. And after that would be an adoption of the rule. But that's basically the next several steps that would be going into this. Any questions about any of that? I have to be on a mic. Everybody has to be on a mic.
Thank you for going over the next steps. What's the timeline look like for those, assuming that you get all the feedback by Friday for this particular meeting, then the hearing, when would you anticipate that taking place, and then any potential adoption?
We are working backwards from looking at an April 1 adoption date, and that hearing would likely be around the third week in March. I don't remember what the exact date that we would be looking at off the top of our head, but it'd be that's around when we'd be looking at. And then we would be filing that hearing notice beginning of February. So in the first week or so of February, in all likelihood.
Then would that the notice include the any proposed changes, or is that determined at the hearing?
The notice will have a draft of the rule language in it. So and it would be that the draft rule language will highlight any of the changes that are in there. There will also be a full explanation of what we see the changes as. It's a whole 15-page packet with a whole bunch of info in there, but it'll include our sort of collated responses on the fiscal and economic impact question, the racial equity within the state question. All of that will be in the hearing notice. But yeah, the rule language specifically will be in there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Other process questions? Okay. Well, if that's all, I hope you all have had as much fun here participating as I have had facilitating. Thank you so much for coming down. We really appreciate having all the input into our rulemaking process. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.